Welcome to Thank You for Your Service on Wisconsin Rapids Community Media. My name is Tom Heiser, and I will be your host. Today we will be interviewing Vietnam-era veterans Jim Campbell and Mike Thompson, who are co-founders of the Never Forgotten Honor Flight out of Wausau, Wisconsin. Thank you for your service.
Thank you, Tom.
Thanks, Jim.
Thank you for yours.
Okay, starting out, we'll go back and forth a little bit. Tell us a little bit, where are you from, Jim? Where'd you go to school? Where are you from?
Grew up in Merrill, Tomahawk.
In high school?
Yes. I started in Merrill and then transferred in my junior year to Tomahawk.
Okay.
I looked at Mike because I have many hometowns, but Merrill primarily. I spent most of my life in Merrill.
How about you, Mike?
I grew up in Sioux City, Iowa, back in the 50s and 60s, and transferred up here in 1980. I've been here since then.
Okay. Go to college?
I did, Mankato State University,
And graduated to degree?
magna cum laude. We'll get this off at a little
Yeah,
funny note,
yeah,
but
yeah.
no, I graduated in 1973 and was in sales for 40 years essentially, and did retirement about 5 years ago.
Finally.
Yeah,
Okay.
right.
College, Jim?
I'm a pointer, UWSP.
Okay.
Graduated with degrees in biology and general science, and ended up signing up for a Marine Corps aviation program as a freshman. So took a left turn at the after graduation and went in the Marine Corps.
So the ROTC went through?
Well, ROTC is Army. The Marine Corps is a program they call the Platoon Leaders Class, PLC, where you go to boot camp in the summer, and then the idea is you go to 2 summers of boot camp, and when you graduate, you get your commission. That didn't exactly work out, but I ended up going to OCS as well, and went into the flight program.
Why the Marines?
Well, that was pretty simple. My dad was a Marine in World War II.
Okay.
So I think I was probably brainwashed my entire life of being a Marine. And as you know, in the mid '60s, there was a little skirmish that started over in the southeast part of Asia, and I knew even if I graduated from college, the likelihood that then my deferment would be over, and I would end up going at Uncle Sam's request. And even at the age of 18, 19, I knew I would rather be above ground flying something than in a jungle carrying something. So I said, I'm gonna do that. So I'm gonna court my own destiny instead of waiting for Uncle Sam to say, "Welcome aboard," and you're gonna go there and do this.
Here's your rifle.
Here's your rifle. Yeah. So,
How about your military career, Mike?
Well, essentially, Tom, I grew up in a military career as a son of a World War II B-17 flight engineer, top turret gunner, 35 missions in France, Belgium, Germany. He then came back home and married my mom, and then he served during Korea and followed finally by Vietnam as a 53-year-old Chief Master Sergeant, air maintenance controller in Vietnam. So my military career began, I was a sophomore at Mankato, and my father was in Vietnam, and he knew that my older brother was in waiting to go to Vietnam. The day my dad stepped out of country, my brother went in. Actually, he went in earlier, but he didn't tell my dad. But and my dad, as a member of the Air National Guard in Sioux City, their whole guard unit was activated to go to Vietnam together in '69, and so he knew that he was full-time Air Guard at the time, and he knew that when they came back, there were going to be a lot of people getting out, and they needed to job security for him, and really as a patriot, he wanted to make sure that the Air National Guard in Sioux City was going to be vibrant and viable for the foreseeable future, and it still is today. But he wanted to get me recruited into the Air National Guard, which gave me deferment for the balance of my college career, and also chances are at the time, like today, the Guard units are redeploying 3, 4, 5 times sometimes, and Vietnam it typically was 12, 13 months and you're done. So. I took his advice and joined the Air National Guard and spent 6 years from 69 to 75 in the Iowa Air National Guard as a weapons specialist on F-100s.
The irony, and I just found out just now, another thing that we share is we both committed as sophomores in college.
Interesting.
I didn't know that you had done that before.
Only many years before you, or after you, though.
Yes, many.
So family basically motivated you to go into the branches of service that you went into and why you went in.
Yeah, exactly.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay. So when you went in, did you go with any friends or associates from college, or did you go in alone?
I went in alone. I mean, I remember after I had signed up for this program, before they accepted us, we had to take a battery of exams, and then we had to have aviation type physicals to see if we could see and that kind of thing. And they brought up 2 H-34 helicopters, were original Marine Corps transport in the early stages of Vietnam, and they landed right in front of my dorm in Point, and they took 6 of us down to NAS Glenview in this loud, obnoxious sounding, oil dripping, vibrating machine. And I went, I want to fly this. This looks like fun. Because we never got 500 feet off the ground the whole way. So there were 6 of us from Point at the same time that were going down to take the exam. And I don't know what happened. I know one of them ended up going in the Marine Corps, but we didn't go in together, essentially. It's different career paths and so forth.
So what was your time frame at Point? What time were you at Point? What years?
65 through 70.
Did you go in alone, Mike, or did you? Were there friends went with you
A
also?
friend of mine, college friend of mine, went in. We enlisted at the same time, and same thing, battery test and physical. And my friend actually flunked the physical, so he got 4F right out of the gate. So going in alone was fine. I mean, I was committed to doing it anyway. So it, I guess, my only issue going in was, how your friends always want to make sure that you have a good time the night before you go to boot camp, and so they oiled me up pretty good, like your vehicle, and. If anybody has Air Force background, they know what a Goonie bird is, and that's a C-47, probably the oldest carrier or troop carrier in World War II, and they had one that flew our group down to San Antonio, Texas, in June, and so June and July and part of August we spent. Pretty hot days in the PT class and those sort of things. But yeah, I that was my very first flight, was on that Goonie bird, and whereas I did not physically get sick, I was nauseous for about 3 days. We came into San Antonio with a lot of updrafts and downdrafts, and the airplane was doing this for about the last 20 minutes, and I don't think I ate for about 2 days, and, which is good because the food's not that good anyway. But it's better than the Marines, I can tell you that.
No doubt.
So that was your basic training, was down in Texas?
Yeah, San Antonio, Texas, yeah.
How'd you like basic?
When you're 18 years old, it's not that hard. It's challenging, especially when it's 105 degrees out there, but I was in pretty good shape. I played football, baseball, wrestled, and did athletic things. So I wasn't a trackster by any means, so I didn't break any obstacle course records. But it was a lot of training, classroom work as well as the physical end of it, and you just you meet some people from all over the United States, and it's an enlightening experience for a 18, 19-year-old kid that's trying to find his way in the world right after leaving your high school buddies who you know pretty well, and now you got all these new guys that you're trying to make friends with and blend in and survive just like everybody else. So it was. I don't know that anybody can say I enjoyed basic training, but it was fine.
Marine Corps basic 60s. How was it?
Well, OCS is different than the enlisted guys going through Parris Island or MCRD in San Diego. And as I alluded to before, the PLC program between my sophomore and junior year that summer, it was a 6-week program. And I was 18 and 19 years old. I could run forever. Physical part was not a problem. OCS is 60% physical and 90% mental. And so the physical was a piece of cake at that time. I went in with, there was 50 in my company. And we were all college kids, as the DIs reminded us on a regular basis. Very derogatory most of the time. And you could literally quit anytime you wanted. So
Sometimes encouraged.
encouraged. So it started with 50, and 22 of us finished. Now wind the clock ahead 4 years. I'm 4 years older. I got 4 years of partying under my belt and about 20 more pounds under my belt. And now I went back to the OCS, which is 12 weeks. So I had 18 weeks of OCS. Now the physical wasn't that easy that time. It was a little more challenging. But the mental part, I hit, because I had experienced it already. The irony is, we started with 50 guys, again. 25 wanted to be pilots. They wanted to be jet jocks and helicopter pilots. At the end of the 12 weeks, which was a challenge on all fronts, 22 of us were commissioned. 28 didn't make it. One guy quit before he got to the barbershop. He didn't get a haircut. And so out of the 25 that want to be pilots, 12 of them were in that group of 22, and we went then to Pensacola for flight training, which people say, how hard was that? It was like taking 4.5 years of college and smashing it into 11, 12 months. And so out of the 25 that wanted to be pilots, 4 of us pinned our wings on. So they talk about attrition rates in other branches of the service. That's a higher attrition rate than the SEALs and Green Berets. It's a tough program. But the thing is that a lot of guys, like freshman year in college, 70% of my class flunked out. Men. Because they went to college to avoid the draft. Then they get to college and they didn't study. They studied beer and other things and flunked out. Well, you have to have a motivation factor to keep you going. Obviously, that's the sheepskin. You got a degree and you get a job and that kind of thing. But personally, I think you have to have as strong of a negative driver. What I mean by that is, if I flunk out of college,
Going to Vietnam.
I'm going to Vietnam.
Yeah.
Which one do you think is more motivating? It's not a piece of paper. I can tell you that.
Yeah.
Well, flight school or OCS was the same thing that most guys didn't get. If you flunk out of OCS, you know where they send you?
Vietnam.
Parris Island. Then to Vietnam. Now, I wanted to be a pilot, but I wanted to be a grunt much less. So that drove me. Same thing with flight school. Get those gold wings, I get to fly airplanes or helicopters, whatever. But if you flunk out, they send you back to boot camp for second lieutenants. Then you go to Vietnam, carry a rifle.
This is your M16.
But now you got 50 young, hard-charging 18-year-olds that you're leading through the jungle. So I always talk to my Boy Scouts in my troop that were going in the military, and I always have that kind of conversation with them about getting yourself motivated both ways
Right.
to drive you.
Positive and negative.
Positive and negative, and the negative is always a stronger motivator.
Flight school for helicopters. I know I've talked to a mutual friend of ours.
Yeah.
Fire, police chief in Grand Rapids.
Yep.
And we talked about his flight school. He said, it's tough. It's not, well, here's your helicopter and here's how you fly. You gotta learn how to swim, you gotta learn how to get
Oh, my goodness
water upside down.
Oh my goodness! Oh my goodness! Well, now flight school in every branch of service is different. If you go to Pensacola as a Marine, Coast Guard, or Navy aviator wannabe, you start off in fixed wing. So Marines are trained in both, and you fly 2 fixed wings before you get to a helicopter. And if you can operate your brain housing group, move both hands in different directions and in your feet at the same time, that's a
Yeah.
good start. But I laugh when you said water, and somebody just posted it the other day. We had to do water survival training, and in flight school, but in the reserves later on we had to do it, and it was all day in a pool in equipment that simulated a helicopter crashing in the ocean. And it was the hardest training I ever went through in 20 years in the Marine Corps. It scared the bite right out of me. I joke. I said I saw Jesus 3 times that day, and every time he had scuba gear on. The guy dragging me out of the
Yeah.
unit or whatever. So yeah, you had to continually. It's a thing you didn't want to think about, but if you land in the water in a helicopter, it's not a good thing. You know, and if you take the average attrition rate of helicopters flying in the jungle in Vietnam, it was 30%. You're better off being on the ground than being in a helicopter. So, yeah, it was very, very rigorous, both mentally and physically, and they did it on purpose, of course. I had a guy, a very good friend of mine from OCS, who conscientiously objected out of flight school. Only guy I ever heard of that did that. He didn't believe in the fact that instructors are pounding on the back of your helmet with a knee board. Well, if that's going to bother you, you think 50 cal machine gun shooting at you might mess you up a
Get
little
your
bit?
attention.
So
Yeah.
you had to be able to operate the aircraft safely under extreme duress. And you get to learn a little bit of that duress during the training. So,
Real early, real often.
yep.
Yeah.
Advanced training for you, Mike.
Essentially, weapons specialist is proficient, and these are a lot of years ago, so I don't remember all the terminology. But the missiles and the rockets, not real high tech. It was high tech for the day, but not compared to today's smart bombs and those kind of things. But there were a lot of top secret structures in the brain cell of the missiles but primarily 20 millimeter cannons and cockpit familiarization. I operated as a cockpit man on a bomb load crew, where essentially you're testing the guns with the gun trigger and the bomb with the bomb button, and it's all electronic stuff that you're determining that you got a good lead to pylon 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and so forth, and operating bomb lift trucks and putting the pylons on, arming, de-arming the bombs. Of course, in our case, we were all practice bombs as opposed to the real thing. But 20 millimeter cannons were live, and it was always fun going to the gun range and watch them firing at both moving targets and ground targets. But at the beginning of each flight, you're at the end of the runway, or the beginning of the runway, I should say, and there's so you're actually planes are fired up and they're screaming like crazy. You got head protection, but talk about hearing. That's where a lot of that goes. But yeah, we'd come right underneath the aircraft and pull the pins to get them in arming position, and then step back about 50 yards and watch them hit the afterburners and blast off the runway on their takeoff. And and it's rumbling and it's loud, but what a rush! I mean, separate from being in the aircraft itself, doing the actual flying, it's quite a rush to watch them take off at 50 yards away.
Are those F4s?
F-100s, yeah, and they were pretty heavily used in Vietnam. Quite a few of those. They were low-flying, high-speed aircraft. Very good maneuverability in the air. It was like landing in a brick, though. They were very tough to land. And of course, when they come in, if they have any unfired ordnance, you have to put a safety tag in the bomb
Gazinta.
yeah, the Gazinta. So, the schooling for that is nowhere near as rigorous as OCS, but certainly you need to know what you're doing, or you can bad things can happen if you don't. As an example, one of my duties was to take a kind of a long needle nose thing and open up one of the panels on the fuselage and stick it in there and pull a circuit breaker out there, so that when you push that bomb button, you don't drop the external tanks of fuel on the runway. That's a bad thing.
Old days messed up. No.
Yeah, they call alerts on that. So simple as it may seem, and it's got a little clamp on the end of it. You push the button and it opens the clamp, and then you pull it down and you pull that circuit breaker out. Well, I got it on there okay, and you got a flashlight because it's back deep in there. The clamp is about that long, and I pulled the circuit breaker, but it only came halfway out. And I'm going through my testing and hit the bomb button, and fortunately the pins held the fuel tanks, but they dropped and the whole airplane is shaking. We're inside the hangar, so that's not a good thing. Lights and sirens start flashing on and off, and fortunately they could see that it wasn't negligence. It was just that the pin or the circuit breaker didn't come all the way out. Nothing to the extent that flying helicopters or jet airplanes, the fun stuff that you got to do. But on the other hand, I was part of the Iowa Air National Guard softball team, fast pitch softball team, and we went to Denver, and out of a 16-team Air National Guard nationwide tournament, we won. We came in first place, so
Congratulations.
had a pilot, yeah, big whoopee, a deal, huh? But no, I mean we talk to guys on the honor flight all the time that coached football or played football or played. I mean that was what they did.
Yeah.
Joe Lewis did exhibitions. A lot of these guys. Clark Gable interviewed B-17. He actually flew on a B-17 and did a real nice interview in the face of fire, but that was not his daily job. He did a lot of interviewing and wore bonds and was functional and in that way. So winning the Air National Guard softball tournament, I'm not sure that saved any lives, but we had fun doing it.
So you're now done with your advanced training. Then you come back to Iowa
Correct.
and just do the
weekends
a month.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
2
Yeah,
weeks a year.
our 2 weeks were generally spent at Volk Field and Camp Douglas right here in Wisconsin, and that's what I always enjoyed coming up to Volk Field, and later on in my sales and sales management career, when I had the opportunity to look at a job in Wausau, Wisconsin. Actually, it was Schofield, Wisconsin, because that was where the office was located. I thought, Schofield? This is a promotion. I'd never heard of it. But then, of course, they said, well, it's right next to Wausau, and you got Wausau Homes and Wausau Insurance. It brought some familiarity with the area, and have loved it ever since. It's a great state.
Jim, you've now finished your OCS and initial stuff. Your
We'll see us in flight school, finished flight school.
Where'd they send you?
Well, the way Marines are signed a squadron after flight school is pretty simple. The first guy, number one guy in class, gets his choice. And the choice for the Marine Corps was West Coast or East Coast. Every once in a while there was a billet in Hawaii. The week I graduated, it didn't exist. And I wanted to go to California. Number one guy in the class got his choice. And I'm figuring number one's going to take California, number two's going to get North Carolina, number three is me, and I'm going to get California. Except the guy, number one guy, was from North Carolina. So he went to North Carolina, number two went to California, and I went to North Carolina. And you check in to the 2nd Marine Aircraft Wing Headquarters in Cherry Point, and you walk into a room about this big, and one wall is all plexiglass, a panel for each squadron that's on both at Cherry Point and New River, which is a helicopter base 20 miles down the road. And underneath each squadron, there's a list of names of new pilots. They call them pilots under instruction, but of course there's an acronym. It's PUI, which is more derogatory than pilots under instruction. And I had met a Cobra pilot in flight school, and after talking, first of all, I knew I wanted to fly helicopters. I didn't want to fly high and fast. I wanted to go low and slow in comparison. And Tom McDonald, talking about his experience in Vietnam, figuring I'm going to be there anyway, I want to fly Cobras. So I'm in this room, waiting to be assigned. The major's busy. I'm BSing with the lieutenant, and I'm looking at the squadrons. There's only one Cobra squadron, and there were 17 names on the panel. Some of the squadrons had 4 or 5, some had 1. There were more brand new guys in the Cobra squadron. A Major Stunny comes over. He says, "Well, Lieutenant, what do you want to fly?" Like, I have a choice. It's a beautiful thing. "Cobra, sir." And he did the same thing I was doing. He turned around and looked at all the squadron assignments, and he said, "I don't think so, Lieutenant. They have 17 guys already. I need to put you in a CH-46 squadron or a Huey squadron." I looked down on my uniform, the brand new shiny pair of gold Naval Aviator wings that I just worked 13 months to get, and I took them off my uniform and I laid them on the desk in front of the major and used the words I never liked to hear as an officer from an enlisted man. "With all due respect, sir, if I can't have the Cobra squadron that I've been working my butt off for the last 13 months, you can have those back. I'll go be a grunt officer." Now, he looked at me right down to my soul, waiting for me to blink, because he knows it just costs the Marine Corps about $1 million to train me. So he turned around and he looked back at all the panels again, and then he did a quick white-tailed deer look back to see if you were looking, to see if I'd blink, and I did not blink. I just stood there at attention. And he picked up his magic, I'll never forget this, picked up the magic marker and walked over, and as he's writing my name, number 18, on he said, "They've already got 17, they won't even know you're there. Pick up your wings, Lieutenant." So then I checked into to New River into a Cobra squadron, and that's what I flew for most of my active duty.
Good story.
I love it. And it's the best poker hand I've ever played in my life. Because I was bluffing. I'm telling you, I was bluffing. I'd have flown a washing machine if it had wings. Rather than carry a rifle in a desert. Or in a swamp, I should say. A jungle. Yeah. So it was a bluff, and I bluffed. The funny thing is, the lieutenant that I had been talking with before knew it. He knew I was bluffing.
He lives in Wisconsin Rapids.
He lives in Wisconsin Rapids.
And this will be broadcast.
So that's where and when I got to North Carolina, which ironically was the last flight I took in flight school, you lead a flight of aircraft from flight school, Pensacola, to another base. It's called an RON, remain overnight, and we went to the base that I was assigned to, and when I was there, I said, I never want to come back here again, and that's where I get stationed. So because of that, I volunteered for everything and anything that took me out of there, which I got to see the North Atlantic and the Mediterranean, go to a bunch of additional military occupation specialty schools, and the hunting and fishing was fabulous. So it turned out to be okay.
So you're now on the East Coast.
I'm on the East Coast, yeah. Jacksonville, North Carolina.
Then where do you go?
Well, I was in my 5 years in active duty, that's where I stayed.
Stayed right
Except
there.
when I was on aircraft carriers for helicopters, which I spent about a year on.
How was that? There's no land out there. The only place you got to put down is that aircraft carrier.
Yeah, and people think, they've seen the photos of F-100s or fixed wing landing, and the analogy is it's like landing on a postage stamp in an ocean, bob up and down. But I can tell you, when you're in the middle of the North Atlantic off of Norway in February, in a winter storm, and the ship is both pitching and yawing at the same time, when you're in a helicopter and you have to land on it, see, the helicopter doesn't have the advantage that a fixed wing, because when the fixed wing hits the aircraft carrier, they punch it. Because if they miss the cable, they can just take off again. Not so much with a helicopter. You have to stick it. You got to do a 10. You got to do a 10 landing right now. And I tell you, at night, and that kind of is, the pucker factor is max. It's absolutely max. Every single time. It's very, very exciting.
So the ocean's not glass all the time.
No. Matter of fact, even when you're on the carrier, and unfortunately we had 2 squadron mates that were, for 2 months that we were there, they were sick all the time, puking. Because of the action of the ocean, if you're just doing this, or you're doing this, you can handle it. But if it's doing both same time, we had to tie ourselves into the bunks, or you'd fall out, and they would not serve our meals on hard dishes or plates or cups. It was all like picnic stuff, because when the wave started tipping us, you'd grab what you thought was the best to eat and hold it. Everything else went on the floor.
Yeah.
It was exciting. And then when you get off the ship, it takes about 2 weeks of
You're still rocking and
you're still
rolling.
rocking. So when you shave, you stand with your legs shoulder width apart, and you're holding the mirror or the wall when you're shaving. So yeah, it's a lot of fun.
So Iowa Guard, said you come to Wisconsin a lot. What was your training consist of during your time with the Guards when you were in Wisconsin training at Polk Field?
Well, they flew life sorties. I think the training grounds were up by Pittsville, actually. Baraboo, Pittsville, in that area. They had,
Babcock area?
or Babcock, yeah, up in that area.
Bombing range?
So the bomb range was up there, and
I shot there, too.
and they would typically fly probably 30, 40 sorties a day. So they're pretty active. They're in and out pretty much all day long. Occasionally we'd get an opportunity to go up to the bomb range and watch it, which was kind of fun. A lot of excitement there. But and we'd be on shifts. We'd be some would work in the morning, some would work in the afternoon, and then swap that out and bring your lunches along, and you got basically just a little. Not even a tent. It's just it's 3-sided tent, if you will, and one side's open to the aircraft and the runway. And like anything, it's hurry up and wait. It's not boom, 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 boom. So you can bring a deck of cards and tell some jokes and play cards and just talk about life.
So, but still the possibility of getting activated.
Yeah, absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely, yeah.
It's not that you're just sitting back and
Right.
collecting National Guard pay. There's possibility
We
of going.
they have what they call ORIs, or Operation Readiness inspections, pretty regularly during the heat of 69, 70, 71, and so we were we became, even with the number of new recruits after the guys came home from Vietnam. We were operationally proficient pretty much after I'd say probably about 18 months. which is kind of a high rate of speed for a whole unit, a squadron to come together, or actually a group to come together that quickly and pass your operational readiness inspections and be, combat ready.
Was there any discussions within your unit, other than Vietnam or going somewhere overseas? You being activated?
No, it's, I guess, much different than today's world of terrorism and hotspots across the world, if you will. Vietnam was the spot. I can't think of any other hotspot that was, Cuba, of course, was in the early 60s, and, there were a number of people that spent time up in Alaska, the Aleutians there. Russia, of course, was still kind of Cold War era, but Vietnam was the place to be or not to be, I guess. But so I don't know that there was any deployments that I recall. Maybe some TDYs just for a short training session, but Vietnam was that was where it was at between really 61 to 75, I guess. Yeah. Today's world is, hot spots all over the place. So,
Even though the NATO cruise I was on, that was a joint operation with NATO up in Norway, and because of there were still a lot of unfriendly countries in that part of the world, and the Med cruise, we were launched early because of a situation where one of our merchant marine vessels in the Suez Canal, one of the Egyptian-Russian gunboats took a shot across its bow, just to kind of let them know what's going on, and all hell broke loose.
war games.
So we had a mission that involved our carrier in a rescue operations of Americans that happened to be in major Egyptian cities like Cairo. And not even real, we're young 24-year-old lieutenants full of, vinegar and we're bulletproof and invisible and all that kind of stuff. And I still remember the Russian submarines and battleships and their Bear bombers going over us all the time. And one of my collateral duties, because in the Marine Corps, the pilots run the squadron and they also fly. In the Air Force, pilots are pilots. They fly. They don't run the administration section, intelligence section, and all that kind of stuff. Well, one of my collaterals was intelligence officer, so I had to continually brief the squadron on enemy situations and recognition of enemy aircraft and all those kind of things. And so I'm out flying one day with a buddy of mine, and we're just getting our flight time. And we see this Russian ship. I said, this would be a good opportunity to get an up close and personal photograph of this ship. Think, Becky, are you an idiot? So we flew right over the top of the ship. I'm talking 200 feet and getting some great photos. The ship deck was like red. There wasn't a person on the deck. And I said, hey, Opie, that was my buddy's call sign. You notice those guns? The big guns, the big hole? They were following us like that. And we're in an attack helicopter. It's like a mosquito.
Being attacked.
They're just going to swat it. And they're following us around like this. And one of us said, maybe this is not such a good idea. Maybe we ought to get out of here.
Cooler minds
Which we
prevail.
did. The next day, the captain of the ship, through his commanders on board, relayed a telex, because they didn't have emails, from Washington, D.C. They didn't know who the two young guys were. And they said, you will not fly within 2,000 feet and 2 miles of any Russian ship or you will be court-martialed immediately and sent home. So Opie and I were a little nervous for a while, thinking that our careers were over with. But one of the kind of exciting things that happened. But until I read the book October Wars, I had no idea at that time, that was 73, 74, how close we were to World War III. it was really close.
Yeah.
Because, we had no idea what was going on politically, really. We're just doing our job out in the middle of the Mediterranean.
Interesting. Our history is, now you're seeing the backsplash.
Yes, exactly correct. Exactly correct.
Any other little incidents that you'd like to
Oh my
discuss
God,
or
oh
fun?
my God. I'm actually gonna, in the process of, because we tell our veterans on the honor flight to do this all the time, that I'm gonna write some stuff down so my three grandsons will have something they'll know about their grandpa when he was in the Marine Corps. Like, where did he get that nickname? That's a goofy nickname. And what did he fly? And the whole thing that started is the number of times the Marine Corps aircraft tried to kill me, which was more times than I cared to count. But I found out it exponentially got large more and more often when I added my age and the age of the aircraft, and that number kept getting pretty close to 100. So the fifth, I spent then, joined IBM, came to Milwaukee, and ran into another Marine Cobra pilot in an elevator in downtown Milwaukee, of all things. He happened to be in the West Coast, and he got me into the a Huey squadron in Glenview that I didn't even know existed. And I flew with them for 16 years and ended up retiring. But that range that Mike's airplane, F-100, shot at, we would come up there with our Hueys with the electronic Gatling guns and do the same thing. And they would have a target, and when every round that went through it, they'd have a big LED that would count the numbers, how many times you hit it as you're flying by, smoking by at 100 miles an hour with a Huey, right?
All 100?
So my mission was to get in the back and shoot it. I'm flying. I want to shoot this gun.
Yeah.
This is this electronic. It's like an old-fashioned Gatling gun, except it's electronically driven off the electronics of the aircraft. And this thing starts spinning, and it spits out the ammunition like crazy. So at every pass, I would tell the crew chief, Gunny Lopez, his name was, who was teaching new crew chiefs how to shoot. And then he would shoot to show them, and I would always say, "Hey, Gunny, you better pick up the pace here, because if I'm taking you into battle, you better be able to hit the target more times than that." And I would just harass him, just having a good time. Finally, about the third time, he said, "Sir, will you land this thing? You get back here." Yes!
Sucker.
I got him. And put him up in the co-pilot seat.
Yeah.
And I had an opportunity to shoot that gun, and I beat him.
You did.
I beat him, absolutely. I think by one. But it was enough.
It's that bird hunting in Merrill.
A lot of fun. A lot of fun.
You mentioned a nickname.
Yep.
What is it?
Turk.
From and reason.
Now, there's a story I told my kids that they looked at me and they threw the
BS.
They threw the BS flag.
Yeah.
It was on the NATO cruise. And my adult beverage of choice at the time was wild turkey. And so I thought it was kind of cool, so I cut the turkey off and I pasted it on my helmet, on my flight helmet. So they started calling me Turkey Man, which is way too many words, and it's too long. And Hank Palacki, who was a CH-46 pilot, one day truncated it to Turk, and it stuck like glue. It just stuck like glue. So the guy that I told you that I was flying with, his nickname was Opie. Well, he looked just like Opie Taylor on
Mayberry.
Mayberry, Andy Griffin show. So every pilot had a call sign like Maverick and Ice.
Yeah, Top Gun.
Yeah, Top Gun. But you didn't give them to yourself. You got them, and sometimes they were.
You earned them, or
you deserved them.
deserved them. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Any funny stories from your time frame?
Again, a long time
discuss.
ago, so none that I can really
Can't remember yesterday.
think of. I think I think one guard unit, and all my superiors are probably gone by now anyway. So, but we deviated from the normal plan, and we went out water skiing on the Missouri River. So, but we got back in time, and I think we might have been sent out to get a haircut or something like that. I don't know. You know, everything was about sideburns above the ears and short hair, and of course in the 60s and 70s, the Beatles were famous, and their hair was long.
Oh, yeah.
Everybody's hair
Yeah.
was long.
Yep.
So, revolution in the air.
Yeah, left a couple of Hueys. One was kind of funny. We landed at Green Bay on our way to our overnighter in Marquette, which was party all night and then go home. And we landed in the FBO operator parked us off the taxiway in the grass. And the other pilot and I went in to the office and using the facilities and getting some coffee, and our crew chief comes in, and he's mud from head to foot, and he's got a handle from his suitcase, and he's white. Hey Tom, what's going on? He said a Republic 580 just ran over our helicopter. And we said, what? Yeah, 580 just came down the runway and hit us. So we went out there. Sure enough, our tail boom was gone. The pilot was off the center line of the taxiway by 6 feet, and he took the tail boom of our helicopter and was hanging like this. Put a slice in the wing, and this was passengers that were going to go to Chicago and then go to Hawaii.
You're talking about
Ironic.
Republic Airlines?
Republic Airlines,
Oh, okay.
a 580.
Yeah.
That old prop airplane. And they had that airplane was flying in 45 minutes. Ours, on the other hand, not so much.
Yeah.
They had to get a C-130 and throw it in the back and carry it home. So we've had a couple of situations. Number of stories like that are going to be in the book.
Okay. Now, honor flight. You ready? What made you consider forming Never Forgotten Honor Flight, and when did you guys do it?
This is two stories. This is two roads
Okay.
that converge.
Go.
2007, I'm making sales calls down in Kewaskum, and one of my IBM colleagues is the part-time mayor of Port Washington. And we have been having lunch. And he's talking about something that he's going to start in honor of his father in Milwaukee. No idea what he's talking about, but he's telling me the concept. And he said we could use another one up in northern Wisconsin. Well, what he was working on was Stars and Stripes Honor Flight. He was the founder of Stars and Stripes. And that's 2007. And I said, Joe, I'm too busy. I'm working right now. I don't have time. Maybe when I retire. So 2 years later, now I'm got more time. Before you can start one, you have to have gone on one as a guardian. So I applied at 2 Wisconsin honor flights to go as a guardian, and I'm patiently drumming my fingers, waiting for a phone call, waiting for something, so I can get this thing going. Because I had called National, asking what I got to do. Meanwhile,
Segue. Totally separate from any knowledge of what Jim had been doing. As I mentioned, I grew up in Sioux City, Iowa, and had a brother that was on the board of directors of a Siouxland honor flight, and they had flown. Well, they hadn't flown any yet, and my brother asked me if I wanted to fly on the first Siouxland honor flight, and I said, "What's an honor flight?" And he kind of explained it to me that we fly World War II veterans to Washington D.C. to see their memorials. And I said, "Boy, that's interesting. That's a neat idea. You know, that's 500 miles away, and time out of my again working full time, owning a business, and I said, and the timing just wasn't right for me. I had a lot going on, so I passed on it. But he remembered it 6 months later when they were flying their second round of World War II veterans, and asked again. Mike, we're flying in June, and would like to provide the same offer to fly as a guardian with us. And And at the time, I had a better excuse this time, in that I had some medical issues with prostate cancer, and we're dealing with that. And then about 8 months later, he called me for the third time and said, "Mike, do you still have Dad's casket flag?" I said, "Well, let me check." And I went back in the closet, and sure enough, I've got it. I'm pretty sure I had it, but sometimes those things get moved around, and there it was. And I said, "Yeah, I've got it, Chuck." And he said, "Well, I'd like you to bring that to our final honor flight for a special ceremony for our dad. And Danny, our other brother, he's coming, and I'd like you to have you join us." And no more excuses. And all along, I knew it was the right thing to do, and it was an awesome thing to do. Didn't have a clue how awesome it was until I went on it. So I brought the flag and drove to Sioux City, the 500 miles, and I didn't even do Guardian training. I mean, they just stuck me in there because I came late, and my brother kind of briefed me on what to do, and so I get a Iwo Jima Marine, a Okinawa Marine, and an Army for Coral Gable, Florida, and as my veterans to care for that day. And as we encourage our honor flight guardians to open up dialogue and get them to talk, I was pretty good at that, because we peppered my dad with question after question after question for all the years we grew up. And Dad would basically tell us what he knew we could handle at 8 years old, at 10 years old, at 14 years old. And as we got older, the stories got a little more gruesome and a little hairier. But so in any case, the day proceeded into D.C. Well, we had a pre-flight dinner, and much of our, going back and forth a little bit here, but much of our honor flight was tailored after the Siouxland honor flight, because that's all I knew. And that's the reason why they require you to be a guardian before you start an honor flight. And so, yeah, I'm in D.C. and with two of my brothers and my dad's flag, and this ceremony at the World War II memorial occurs, where we're doing our photo op with 100 some World War II veterans, and they start, myself and my two brothers at the end of that line with a empty wheelchair and a flag and a picture of my dad in 1944 in his uniform. And so I'm holding the picture, my other brother's pushing the empty wheelchair with a flag. And that ceremony, which we use to this day, is called Flags of Our Heroes. And it's in honor of our father, but also in honor of all of the World War II vets that didn't live long enough to see their memorial. So it encompasses, in this case it was the state of Iowa, and in our case when we do it, it's the state of Wisconsin, and those are the terms that we use. And as we're pushing that wheelchair across the front of those 100 World War II veterans, they're all full salute, and there's a bugler over here playing taps. And if that doesn't get your attention and being emotional and proud to be an American, nothing will. So we marched that wheelchair in front of those saluting veterans up to the Iowa pillar, and placed that flag and wheelchair and picture on the empty wheelchair in front of the Iowa pillar. Of course, we do the same thing now at the Wisconsin pillar. Jim has done it on our very first flight out of Wisconsin with his father and his father's picture, and it's the beginnings of a life-changing experience. Next stop, we're at the Iwo Jima Memorial, where two of my guys are Marine vets, and Iwo Jima and Okinawa. Gil from Alton, Iowa, he's got a Pioneer Seed Corn hat on and just a good old boy. He's got he's asked to stand up from his wheelchair or sit in his wheelchair. He opted to stand. You know, he was ambulatory, but he needed a ride, so I pushed him most of the day. But he stands up in front of Channel 9, the local television station from Sioux City, and is being interviewed. And one of the questions she asked Gil at the end is, Gil, I understand you earned a Purple Heart. Can you tell us a little bit about that? And Gil paused and said, and I was standing pretty much right next to him just to make sure he didn't fall because he's a little wobbly. And Gil said that, you know, I've always felt guilty about my Purple Heart because when I was in that cave and that grenade went off, two of my buddies lost their lives. He fell to his chair and wept. That's the first time he'd ever told that to anybody.
Let it go.
Yeah. So, without getting into too much detail, there was time after time after time of stories that I heard that were so meaningful and so important for these veterans, and the thanks that they received, the welcome that they got in Washington D.C. at Dulles Airport we were flying into. Crowds of people coming and going to their destinations would come over to the honor flight and shake their hands, and then the same was held true, of course, when we landed back in Sioux City with the crowds that were waiting there with thanks and welcome home. So basically a 24-hour day. Slept in a little bit the next day, and my wife and I are back in the car back to Wausau, Wisconsin, 500 miles away, and I'm telling my wife these stories, and tears are running down my eyes because it was such an emotional day. But before I even took I'm backtracking again here, but before I took this trip to Sioux City. My brother-in-law, who was in Jim's squadron in Glenview, that helicopter squadron, said, hey, we're going to play some golf down in Madison. Why don't you ask Campbell, who he knew I knew. Jim and I were acquaintances. Hi, Jim. Hi, Mike. That was the extent of it. And called Jim, and we'll go down to Madison and play some golf. And so I called Jim, and he said that, well, that weekend's not going to work. He's going to be in Minneapolis visiting his daughter, and chatted a little bit longer. And I said, oh, by the way, Jim, I'm taking this thing called an honor flight in my hometown of Sioux City. When I get back, let's chat about it. And he said, oh, really? He said, you know, I've been trying to get on an honor flight for 2 years now, or something like that, or a year, or
A while.
yeah. So anyway, I had taken the trip, came back, and really hadn't thought too much about it. But I mean, I've thought a lot about the honor flight because it impacted me so much. And finally, I got to thinking, you know, I got to get the ball rolling here somehow, get it off the bubble, as you put it. And so I wrote a letter to the editor, and I indicated that I went back to my hometown for a thing called Honor Flight, and the veterans got recognized. They got apparel. They saw all their memorials in D.C. They had a pre-flight dinner, kind of a USO show, and if anybody would like to get an honor flight started in the area, call Al Bailey at such and such a number, and I'd be glad to help out. Okay, I had a full-time job. I owned a business, and I was not fully committed to doing it, and received a couple of cursory thank you cards and phone calls. Saw your article, your editorial in the paper, and but nobody really grabbed a hold of it. And then I think I may have talked to Al Bailey and or somebody in Honor Flight Central, if you will. And they said, well, there's this guy that's been trying to get something going himself. I think he's from your area. His name is Jim Campbell. I said, hey, I know that name. I know Jim. He's part of an organization that we both belong to. Again, casual friends, but not, I wouldn't say friends at the time. We were acquaintances.
Yes,
but,
exactly.
So, as things go, again, no response on the editorial, and I knew what had to happen. That's going to happen. Somebody's going to have to grab the ball and go with it. So my first thought was to give Jim a call and see if we could kind of co-share an honor flight, 1, 2, 3, whatever it might be, and move on with our lives. But do something for our World War II vets. The reason the honor flight began was because the World War II memorial was the last memorial built. Vietnam was built first, and then Korea, and then World War II. And by the time World War II was built, these guys are 70, 80, 90 years old. So they didn't have a lot of. The mission was time sensitive, so they needed to get out there, and so I asked Jim to meet me at the relocation bar for a fish fry and a beer, and I had my binder full of pictures and the program and
Sales kit.
and my sales
Ready to
kit, if
go.
you will, exactly right. And Jim and I are both salesmen, so so I was looking for somebody that was military, and somebody that was sales and marketing. Jim's and the fact that I had heard that he was looking to get there from a different angle, we connected, and I started going through my picture log and what was going on, and explaining the day. We were both in tears. Let's go. Let's roll. Off we went. 9 years ago, I believe it was October 21st, 2009, and we're into our 9th year now, and the rest, they say, is history. But again, we thought maybe 2 or 3 flights, and we're done. And here we are now, morphing into flying World War II, Korea, and Vietnam. In fact, our last flight Monday, we had just 1 World War II veteran and 99 Vietnam veterans on our 32nd mission. 2,935 World War II Korean and Vietnam veterans have been on a trip of a lifetime with us.
And we've got 12 flights of Vietnam era veterans on the wait list.
Yeah. So Jim and
We're gonna be
I,
flying a while, I think.
Jim and I bleed the same blood, and
Yeah.
and we finish each other's sentences,
Yeah.
and
It's almost like we're married.
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay,
So,
taking the criteria of what you mentioned, the World War II, Korea, Vietnam vets, what's the basic criteria? Just that they had served, and they were in the military, or do you have some basic other criteria?
It's the years they served. There's years for each of those eras. That is the only criteria.
define dates. if you
Define
will.
dates.
Yeah.
But it's not that they had to been in combat?
Nope.
or-
No.
or
That's the
country or
biggest,
No.
that's
DD
a
214.
great question. That's the biggest misunderstanding and the number one reason guys aren't signing up. I don't deserve it, which generally equates to I get shot at. The fact of the matter is, in all 3 of those major conflicts, 8% were combat veterans. 8%. 92 were in support roles. And when we talk to organizations, I now have an arrow because they can see it, and I take the tip off, and that's the 8% right there.
That's the combatant.
I said I ripped this fletching off. That's the baker, the DI, the truck driver, the
Cook.
mechanic, the guy who puts the ordnance on the airplane. And if you take that, the arrow's going to fly crooked. You take the knockoff, the arrow won't even load. Then they start understanding. The fact of the matter is, if the 92% do not do their job,
Mission fails.
he
Mission
forgets
fails.
to take out the pin, guy goes on a gun run, and the bomb does not leave the airplane. Or the bullets do not leave the Gatling gun. The mission just failed. Or, even worse yet, the 8% die. So I don't care what the job is, it's important. And number two, I asked veterans, how many of you had a choice, number one, on where you went and served? No hands ever go up.
Yeah.
Because you go where they tell you. They'll take a.
When
we
and
just-
where
We were
and
just
how,
talking about
yeah.
a guy today. He was trained in one discipline, and when he got to that base, they didn't need any of those guys,
Right.
so they made him something else. You do it, and you do the best job you can. The Vietnam generation starts February 28th, 1961, and it goes through May 7th, 1975. That includes all 5 major branches of service, plus the National Guard and the reserves. And one thing that's come to light recently, because it was 3 guys in 1 week, didn't think they qualified. One of them had actually sent me a picture of his DD-14. On line 18, it shows the date that your commitment's complete. He had gone in and was on active duty between 57 and 59. Doesn't qualify. But he was in the reserves, part of his military commitment. He's not going to meetings, not getting paid, but he's the second line of defense. The guys on active duty reserves follow the active duty. Then the class 3 guys are called up. In Desert Storm, 17,000 Marines in class 3 status. They're back at home doing their regular jobs, but they still have that reserve commitment, got called up for Desert Storm. In this particular gentleman's case, his exit from that commitment was 1962. So he qualifies. So look at the DD-214 and see when your reserve commitment after active duty, which for a long time, and I don't know if it still is, was 6 years. So if you went in and did 2 years active duty, you had a 4-year commitment in the reserves, and that counts as well.
Yeah. On our application, Tom, those dates are specified for World War II, Korea, and Vietnam. They're very specific on there. If you served in that time frame, sign up.
Only qualification.
One question for you guys. Right now, locally, we've been really working with getting the donut dollies recognized because they spent 12, 13 months
Yep.
in country.
Yep.
But because of rules and regulations on a federal level, they're not considered veterans.
They aren't. And neither are the guys that work for CIA who flew airplanes for Air America. They were over there. They were getting killed. They were supporting the Americans and their allies in combat, but they were not American veterans.
Could they go on an honor flight?
No, they do not qualify.
Because
You have to have worn a uniform of one of the branches of service. Unfortunately, that's the way it is. And not that they
our
should.
criteria.
It's
but,
not our criteria.
it's national.
And even though they deserve recognition, they are not American veterans.
I know we just got one lady to be honorary member of our VVA.
Oh, sure.
We got the blessing from Washington D.C. and
Yeah.
so she's now,
Honorary member.
yes,
They
Okay.
should be honored in some manner for what they did.
right.
Yeah,
Because they were in harm's way as well.
you bet.
They died over
And
there.
they were providing support. It's morale support, whatever you want to call it, for those that were in harm's way.
You mentioned national. So there is not only your Never Forgotten Honor Flight, there is a national organization that you belong to. Where are they located out of?
Springfield,
Springfield,
Ohio.
Okay.
And they have policies and procedures that we have to abide by. The 131 honor flights
Hubs.
hubs are independent. They're all run by groups of volunteers that get together, like Mike and I did, to start a hub. But they're all independent. We're all volunteers. Even at the national level, there's not executives getting 6-figure paychecks. So now, east of the Mississippi, predominantly the cost to send one veteran is $500. When you start getting west and it becomes 2, 3, 4-day event, the costs vary. But if someone in this area donates $500, they send one whole veteran, not 3/4 of a veteran. We don't take them to Ohio and drop them off.
Yeah.
You know,
Here's your parachute.
we do have marketing expenses and some of that stuff. The company I retired from, Big Blue, I put in for community grant every year, which is thousands of dollars that can't be used to send veterans, but can be used for marketing,
Upgrading laptops or,
computer,
Yeah.
printers, whatever. We give thank you awards to many of our sponsors. That's all paid for out of that funding.
Okay,
so
you mentioned,
our ratio of expenses to veterans is about 99%.
Yeah, we're very
Yeah.
lean, mean machine.
so you mentioned west of the Mississippi. So there's an honor flight.
In Alaska,
46 days.
Hawaii, or not Hawaii, Alaska though.
Alaska,
California.
it's a 4-day event.
Yeah.
Hawaii, North Dakota, Wyoming, and Montana are the only 4 states that are not covered by an honor flight.
It was a 4-day event. So somebody leaving from California.
Anchorage, Alaska is 4 days.
Okay, so they leave from Anchorage, they stop somewhere.
They come down through Vancouver and Seattle. Yep.
Okay, then they spend a night.
Then they fly across the United States, which is a long
Long
day.
day, yeah.
Very long.
And they stay at a hotel for a couple nights out in DC area. And then it's a whole day of travel to get back.
Right.
So it's quite a long event.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
people that don't fly or can't fly or just have a trouble flying, they
Yeah.
can still participate in this program.
There's an honor flight program out of our state, down there Beloit. They have a web page and a Facebook page, and it's called Vets Roll. And they take buses. And we mutually know a gentleman in town that has organized the Heroes Cafe that, for whatever reason, will not get on an airplane. And we've had guys with medical situations that don't want to fly. And they can have the honor flight experience. It's just on a bus. It takes a little longer, obviously.
And I thought I heard Janesville, but.
It's down in that area.
Yeah,
Yep,
yeah,
yep.
yeah.
And we've had guys, some kind of interesting stories. We've had a World War II vet, within the last 2 years, never been on an airplane in his life. His first flight was the honor flight. We had another World War II vet. The last plane he was on, some German Messerschmitt shot him out of it. And he never got another airplane until the honor flight.
Yeah.
So there are guys, and they were more than a little nervous. But once they got on the plane, we keep them so busy coming and going, and it's
They don't
an
have
hour
time
and
to be
30-minute flight. It's not a very long flight, depending on the tail or headwinds. But we keep them busy. If you walked up and down the aisle, in those cases, you would never be able to identify the guy that was scared to death when he
Right,
got on a
yeah.
plane.
So what sites do you guys visit? You get to DC.
Okay.
World War II Memorial, Korea, Vietnam, Lincoln Memorial. We do Arlington Tomb of the Unknown Soldier, changing in the guard ceremony. We go to we mix it up a little bit with FDR, which is a fairly new memorial. And this last Monday, we did our first visit to the 9/11 memorial over by the Pentagon, and that was pretty interesting. We may keep that in our
You also do the Korean War.
yeah, we do Korea. Yeah,
Korea,
They're all pretty close.
Korea,
Yeah,
Vietnam, and Lincoln is one stop.
one corridor, one stop.
Yeah.
We budget about 2 hours there. So
Then the Air Force is the last one in the evening where we have dinner, because it's a nice panoramic view and a lot of places to sit down. Iwo Jima has been out of the mix for a year and a half because one gentleman donated, and I think it was $5.7 million
big bucks.
to redo it, to clean it all up. And right now, they're just rebuilding the roads around it. So expect possibly by this fall, it might be ready to go to again, because that was one of the very first memorials. President Eisenhower dedicated that on the Marine Corps birthday, 1954.
54. Okay.
Interesting you mentioned dinner. This is not a sit-down dinner at a table.
No,
This is a,
it's
this is a
delivered.
It's a
Yeah.
box lunch.
And it
Arby's.
comes from Arby's in
Pretty damn
Ace.
yummy.
Yeah.
It is, the sandwiches are, he's upgraded
They've
the
upgraded
sandwich,
them, so,
and they are awesome.
yeah.
These guys don't go hungry. I think the day of the flight, they get fed 5 times.
Yeah.
So they get
Snacks and
all that. Yeah, they
meals,
get
airplane
plenty
meals.
of food.
Yeah.
You're actually eating on the bus.
We eat on the bus.
Yeah.
On the, you'd think after 32 times we'd have this kind of locked in concrete. Well, we
Plan
always
B,
are
C,
tweaking.
D.
We're always tweaking. And it took us a while to figure out there's 2 stops that have the most walking. World War II, because it's a big memorial. And then the one stop with Lincoln, Vietnam, and Korea. And all of a sudden, a light bulb went on one day. I said, why don't we put the city tour between those two? So they get some walking, then they get the ride in a bus, eat their lunch and relax. Originally it was about 45 minutes. And then you go to the next one, it's a lot of walking. Well, the 45 minutes is now 20 because, not because the because they're driving faster, because we have police escorts.
Park police in
Park police.
Washington, D.C.
We don't stop for anything. We drive on the wrong side of the street. We do U-turns in Pennsylvania Avenue. The only thing that we stop for is an ambulance or a fire truck.
Otherwise, we blow through red
we
lights.
just-
We've got a
sea just
motorcycle
parks.
guy in the front and
Just
a
get out of the
usually a
way.
canine guy in the back, and they got sirens and lights flashing and.
And there are only one other group of individuals that are afforded that honor in D.C., and that's the President of the United States or the Vice President. So when people that live there see the sirens and the cops coming, there's sometimes when the traffic is, you go, where are they going to go? It's bumper to bumper and it's four lanes.
Driving up in the grass.
They're gone. They drive up in the sidewalks. And it turns out, we're chuckling because the veterans, they're going crazy. They love this. And of course, our tour guides are given a blow by blow. They just ran another light. Yeah, that civilian better get out of the crosswalk. He's going to be a speed bump. So it's we continually tweak to try to improve. And like Mike just alluded to, we have to be ready to do a plan B, C, or D at a moment's notice. But the thing is, we've done that many times. The vets have no clue because it just runs as smooth as silk. 2 years ago, the Prime Minister of Japan was at the Korea-Vietnam Lincoln Memorial stop.
During our time frame.
During our time. And it was blocked off. We couldn't get in.
Yeah.
Which upset the park police weren't happy about that either.
Just as a side note on that, the bus driver opened up the door to ask one of the police on ground, what's going on, and he said, well, we got the Prime Minister of Japan here, and the park is closed for an hour and a half. And one of our World War II vets piped up and he says, we kicked their ass 70 years ago. We can do it again.
Well, the interesting
great.
thing is, there's always a little gold nugget to be found, because of that situation, we had about a half an hour, 45 minutes. So we said, why don't we take in FDR? We've never seen that, and now that's become a standard on every flight. FDR Memorial's awesome. It is awesome, and especially for those World War II and Korea guys, because they remember FDR.
Fireside chats. And
and the Vietnam guys obviously don't, but it's still a wonderful memorial. So always something good comes out of it. And we also don't allow it to rain. 32 times we got a little damp twice.
Both in April.
Both in April.
Yeah.
Yep. So
Okay, does every veteran have to have a guardian?
Yes.
yes,
Even the younger Vietnam?
doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. Now the ratio obviously is, when we started, it wasn't never been 1-to-1, but it was 1.5 maybe veterans per guardian. As by the time you fly, it'll probably be closer to 3 veterans to 1 guardian.
Yeah. It was pretty close to that this last flight.
Yeah,
actually.
with 50 guardians, 51 guardians, and 100 veterans.
Yeah.
And the guardians,
And there were several one-on-ones there. So
there were several one-on-ones. So there's a couple that had 3. They have to go through a 2-hour mandatory training session. If they don't go through their training, they don't fly. And there's been some situations where they've had a valid excuse, as I would call it. It's really a valid. The car broke down.
Yeah.
So we said, well, we gotta adapt to that. So we filmed it, and it's on a DVD.
So when they get there late,
They get to watch
we
it.
set them down in a corner and they watch the 2-hour DVD.
And we fed them. I hate to say it, but it's almost every flight. There's one that didn't read the letter, or they heard I don't have to be there till the veterans are there.
Yeah.
And they're still able to fly with us because they watch a 2-hour DVD. So
So there's age limits and mobility limits for the guardians.
18 to 69 cannot be a spouse or a significant other. And we've had some people try.
We're not looking for guys that are,
Yeah.
got a cane,
Yeah.
walking with a cane.
So
And
how does a person become a guardian?
Fill out an application, it's online.
And the website address is?
Neverforgottenhonorflight.org. Actually, I think you can do .com and they get it as well.
Yeah. You know, because we've got just such a short window between the time that we see them in person and the time that they fly, which is the very next day, we've added a few qualifiers on the questionnaire that we give to the guardians, and they're simple things like can you walk 3 to 5 miles a day and push a wheelchair? You know, most of them don't know that, but they have to, in their mind, determine whether they're physically fit enough to do that. Can you walk up a flight of stairs with a bag of groceries and back down? Again, there's nothing scientific to it other than the fact that we need to know that they know that it is a rigorous day. It's I've heard 3 to 5, I've heard 5 to 7 miles that we'll walk during that in a given day.
I know when I went on as a guardian, it's so interesting. You get up like at 4:30 in the morning,
Right.
whatever, and these veterans are just fired. I don't think they slept.
Yeah.
There's a lot of them that don't.
And they're,
yeah.
you know, when they're in their 90s.
Yep.
80s and 90s. And the only time I saw some veterans sleep, and it was only for like 5 or 10 minutes, was maybe the flight back.
Yeah.
Otherwise,
Yeah.
they're ready to go all day.
Somebody juices them with adrenaline.
Yeah.
Because you can, even when they get off the plane,
Yeah.
the guy is wearing the green, the Guardians,
Yeah.
some of them are dragging.
Oh, sure.
But
Yeah.
the veterans, well, they're certainly tired, but when they see what they see when they get off the plane, another shot of adrenaline.
It's a
Well,
rush.
and
It's a rush.
as you know, Tom, some of these, of course, the early flights, they didn't wait all that long, maybe 6 months to a year, and they were flying. But in today's world now, they're 2.5, 3 years. If they sign up today, they're 2.5, 3 years away from
3.5 to 4.
Okay, so they've been waiting for a long time for this, and they get that call, and it's like they won the lottery, and
They're pumped.
their fly day is Christmas. They've been, it's like a kid, an 8-year-old kid waiting for Christmas for 12 months out of the year, and all of a sudden the day is finally here, and
2,935 so far.
Wow. Okay.
We filled the plane with every seat every time. You know, you think statistically, some guys would miss the flight. Except for, we've had some unfortunate situations where they pass
Illness.
away.
yeah.
But if they're alive, they're there.
They're
and
there.
they go.
Yeah.
Interesting. You know, I told you the number one reason they're not signing up, and it's because they don't think they deserve it. They weren't in combat. We can address that. The other has to do with medical. That's probably the second biggest reason. Veterans generally are humble into the fact that they don't want to be a burden on anybody. They don't want somebody to push them in a wheelchair. Well, that's what the Guardians are for.
Help them in a bathroom.
Help them in the bathroom if they need it. Some say, well, I'm too old. I said, how old are you? I said, the oldest veteran to take an honor flight was 107.
Not ours, but
Not ours.
Yeah.
He flew out of Portland.
Right.
The oldest Wisconsin veteran was a young lady out of Madison. She was 103. And the reason I'm saying that for your audience in town is she is now 99 years old, sharp as a tack. One of the original WACs in World War II, one of the original 15. I had the honor of spending an hour at a Heroes Cafe just talking with her. She needs to go on the honor flight. So anybody who knows what I'm talking about, her initials are Sarah Parker. Parsons, I'm sorry.
sign her up.
Her initials are Sarah Parsons. She is in better condition than a bunch that have gone
Oh,
around.
yeah,
A
yeah,
bunch.
yeah.
She'd have no problem at all.
Had 5 amputees?
Yeah, I had a guy tell me one time in a nursing home, why have you signed up? He pointed to the cane. He said, I don't walk so pretty good. And I looked at him, I said, Doc, We've taken 5 guys with no legs. They didn't walk at all. He signed up the next day,
Yeah.
and his son went with him.
Okay, if somebody wants to donate to the honor flight,
Yes.
or sponsor a vet, or do whatever,
Yeah.
how would they go about doing that?
Well, our trifold brochures has a place where you can check a box and somebody will reply to them. But generally, Jim and I are pretty good about receiving the check in person and honoring them on our Facebook and our website with their names on there. Sponsorship levels 500, 1,000, 2,500 and up. But essentially. We've got a website, neverforgottenhonorflight.org, and a phone number 715-573-87
519.
519. Yeah. Say that again.
715-573-8519. Our address is also on the website, on the contact page. It's a UPS post office box. But a lot of organizations, like Mike mentioned, does a fundraiser. And they'll call us and say, where do we mail the money? And we say, well, you can, that's an option, but if you'd like to save how much does a stamp cost now?
48 cents
You
or
want to
something,
save the postage? How about if we come to your next meeting and we'll do a photo op? You can get recognition in the local press. So we do a
And
lot of
the
that.
personal thanks, I think, is
Yeah.
important. It's important to them, and I
Yes.
think it's important to us.
Absolutely.
Because that's our reputation, and
Every
we do
single
appreciate
donor,
it.
every single donor.
Yeah,
It's
we had
on our
12 we had a
website.
12-year-old girl from Mosinee that did a lemonade and cookie stand
Yeah.
and gave us 2 10s and a 5, and
Right.
we were there to receive it with a picture in the Mosinee Times. So,
Yeah.
boy, was she proud, and her parents were really
Oh,
proud
I
of that,
bet.
about that little
And-
girl.
and-
So,
and
and
people
what a
have
life
heard-
lesson for them too.
You know, we've been very fortunate to have the donors that we've had in central and northern Wisconsin. And many times, well, it's been 8 times that an organization or an individual has paid for a whole flight. That's pretty significant.
Yeah.
I just did the calculation a couple of weeks ago because I want to see where the different sponsorship levels fall out. 74% of our donors are the $5 to $499. It's a $10 stapled to a letter, thank you very much. Or the veteran that just got off the flight and said, hey, I want another veteran.
Yeah.
It's not the multi-thousands of dollars that are keeping us afloat. It's the individuals that are sending in tens and 20s and hundreds and that kind of thing.
It's not the corporate, it's the people.
It's absolutely not the corporate. It's the employees of the
In
corporations.
fact, early on in the game,
Yeah.
Jim and I used our corporate list of high-ranking people in organizations and sent them a call to action letter with certain statistics and the fact that the World War II veterans are dying at a rate of 1,000 a day and so forth, and reasons why we needed this kind of money to essentially our budget is about $85,000 per mission, and why and how we needed that money. And so many of the at the corporate levels are tied into United Way, and those are all great reasons to sponsor, but they don't like going off the reservation too much, and of course the honor flight was a new concept and nobody really knew about it, but what we found is that the employees of those corporations, those that had flown with us either as a veteran or as a guardian, decided, hey, instead of wearing jeans for $5 on a Friday and giving it to XYZ good cause reason, they decided let's do it for the honor flight, and that has grown from a snowflake to an avalanche of support, and of course the more and more guardians and veterans that have flown with us, the more awareness that they have to understand what a good concept this is, and why it's worth raising that money for the Never Forgotten Honor Flight.
Anything else you guys want to add? As we
Well-
wrap up here a little bit.
Well, on the honor flight, the veterans scenario, we've taken 2,935. And we told you a couple of reasons, number one, number two reasons why they're not signing up. Interestingly enough, that's probably been about 30% of those that have flown had to be encouraged by somebody to go. Might be family, might be a veteran that's already flown, whatever. Might be one of us, although we touch very few in comparison to the VFWs, American Legion, that kind of thing. But having said that, now 30%, somebody twisted their arm, sometimes all the way to the back of the middle of their back to get them to finally say, okay. We have 100% customer satisfaction. Every single veteran that's gone is glad he went. Not 99% or 95.6, 100%. So those guys that have been sitting out there and I haven't signed up in, and guarantee they're going to be glad they go.
But the only complaint that I've heard, Jim, is the guy that said, I had to hire a plastic surgeon to take the smile off my face.
The day after the
He
flight.
was so happy.
Yeah.
It's been a great adventure, and we continue and will continue until there are no more vets to see their memorial.
Gentlemen, thank you for what you're doing for the veterans.
It's our privilege.
It's our privilege and honor to
Thank
do
you.
it.
Thank you very much for watching.